tomorrow's primary, one of the big critiques that's been made of you and your campaign, about your past statements about Jewish individuals, Israel, the Holocaust, etc.
Yeah.
Your opponent, Joe Fraser, says that you're essentially unelectable if you were to run against Amy Klobuchar in the general election. Steve Daines, the senator from Montana, chairman of the NRSC, has said that you can't win a general election, perhaps based on your previous statements.
Right.
What do you say to those sorts of critiques of your campaign? And do you think that you're going to harm down-ballot Republicans in competitive congressional seats and state house seats, like these establishment Republicans are claiming, if you're the nominee?
Let's take them one at a time. Number one, first and foremost, they said all of those things about Donald Trump. Not those people specifically, but the prevailing conventional wisdom of the political industry said the exact same things about Donald Trump. In fact, many of them say the same thing about Donald Trump right now, and many of them tried their hardest to make sure that Donald Trump was ousted in the Republican primary process because he was, quote unquote, unelectable. Which is strange to me because all of the metrics that we can see suggest that Donald Trump is probably one of the most electable Republicans that we've had. Look at the progress that he's made with blacks in this country, specifically black men who now poll for him at 50%, 51% the last time I checked, which is just incredible and an incredible improvement in this country's politics. The next thing, the Jewish thing. One, I love the Jewish people. I'm a Christian. I wholeheartedly believe that the Old Testament and the New Testament are equally as important in the Hebrew Bible, and it's central to my life. And Jesus Christ was a Jew, and any Christian who denies that Christ in Scripture said first for the Jew, then for the Gentile, is playing a la carte with the Scripture. And I don't like anti-Semites. They tend to also be racist. and I don't even understand where this anti-Semitic claim has come from. Now, there are black elites in this country. There are Hispanic elites in this country. There are white elites in this country. If you can't say that there are Jewish elites, we're just not dealing with reality. In fact, we're not speaking truthfully. And using the Jewish identity in a way that, let's say, ropes certain parts of the conversation off breeds anti-Semitism. My co-host at Free People Radio, I have a podcast, Please Call Me Crazy, and our company, our parent company is Free People Radio, and at Free People Radio, there are only two hosts. One is myself, and the other is Professor Penn, who is a Ukrainian Jew himself, and he is probably, if not, one of my dearest friends in my life, and I consider him to be family. I would die going into battle with him, not against him. So, to call me anti-Semitic, I mean, this has become a trope that people use when they can't say anything else, and it's a harm to the Jewish people. And I say it, I don't know how to reiterate this enough. When I say that globalism is a problem for American citizens, and the local Star Tribune says that that's anti-Semitic, that it's a dog whistle for anti-Semitism. Again, we're not dealing in reality. There are plenty of people who are globalists who aren't Jewish. Globalism isn't exclusive to Jewish people. I think it's actually kind of anti-Semitic for the Star Tribune to even claim that, right? I mean, it's just, it's so strange to hear somebody say that the word globalism is a dog whistle for anti-Semitism. I can't help but start to think that the Jewish identity is being used in the same way that the black identity is. And I recently wrote a frequently asked questions piece for my campaign website that answered this very question. And I say in there, it's offensive to me as a black man and as a Christian. The use of the Jewish identity, the misuse of the Jewish identity is offensive to me in that way, because, first, the Jewish identity, in my opinion, is now being used to justify the expansion of a global government. The black identity mostly is used to expand the federal government here in America, and they're used interchangeably. And it's just that both blacks and Jews in this country have to get to a point where we no longer allow the misuse of our identity to dominate American political culture. And I'm much more critical of the black bourgeoisie. I'm much more critical of the black elites who carry water for the Democrat Party than I am of any Jewish lobby. But if I can't even say there's a Jewish lobby, we're not even, we're not dealing in reality. And that's part of the reason that we lost this country. Look, my support of Israel, I've said time and time again, we should support Israel. And if we're going to support them on a biblical and historical biblical basis, then let that be the case. And amen. Praise be to God. No problem here.
I see. Now, when it comes to, you said that.
But I also say, but wait a second, I wasn't finished yet. I'll also say this. My position on our support for Israel is the same as it would be for any other country in terms of our foreign aid. And every country that we give support to should have conditions. Now, obviously, those conditions will be different based on which country it is and what the need is. But there should always be conditions. Nobody should get our unconditional support. And if that makes me anti-Semitic, again, I have to reject that. That is not a proper use of the Jewish identity. And what do I mean about conditions? For a long time, we have claimed to be, in support of Israel and trying to protect Israel, but we're on every side of the trade there in that conflict, in that war. And anybody who says otherwise is lying. We cannot be on every side of any war anymore. We cannot fund both sides of any war. And we give money to all of Israel's enemies, every last one of them. And most of all, maybe, we give money to China. And our political elites who claim to want to protect Israel have conceded that we are living in the managed decline of the West that will prop up China as the next world leader. And we know that Iran is getting money from China. So every time one of these uniparty politicians concedes and bends the knee to allow our economic and trade, agreement to be what it is and allow China to dominate, they are funding Israel's enemies directly. Now, your average American citizen and voter, your average black or Jew or Christian may not understand that or may not really emphasize or prioritize that in the way that they see politics. But I do. And that's why I'm running for the United States Senate. In order to protect Israel, we have to stop giving money, all of our money, a good chunk of our money to a country that buys oil directly from Iran. Anybody who says otherwise is lying. And I question, I'm skeptical of if they really want to protect Israel and the Jews, because I do.
I see. Now, when it comes to the issue of Israel and Gaza, this state of Minnesota has Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, who has attracted a lot of attention and criticism for her rhetoric on Israel, for her support of Gaza, and many argue that that stems from her Somali heritage and her sort of Islamic faith. There's a large community of Muslim Americans and Somali Americans in Minnesota, voters who may participate in your primary. Have you somewhat curated your campaign's message to address, the concerns of that community about Israel, about the war in Gaza? Is some of your rhetoric right now about Israel and globalism linked to sort of trying to reach those voters, or are you sort of saying this completely independent of them?
Well, yeah, no, my campaign is about being America first, about redefining American politics, and first and foremost by redefining the Republican Party and what our fundamental pillars are of this party. Border, debt, forever wars. We got to close our border. We got to stop adding to the debt. We got to pay back the debt, and we got to stop getting involved in these forever wars. So I'm trying to reach voters at a much more let's say, spiritual level or even a granular level around policy, mostly foreign policy. The Heart of the America First message is deeply rooted in foreign policy, a referendum on our foreign policy. So, and look, in Minnesota, I haven't run into the same sort of, let's say, contentious, questions or let's say spirit around the Israel and Gaza issue. I mean, people can barely afford gas. Now, they may be able to pretend like that issue is a big deal for them, on social media or on message boards or maybe even at the dinner table. But it's not bigger than them not being able to pay their rent or pay their gas or pay their grocery bills, right? So, we're trying to deal with fundamental America First issues uh, first and foremost. And if people have questions on those issues in Minnesota, I tell them my honest opinion. Look, my honest opinion is that you're talking about a conflict that goes back as far as we can see, historically. And like Donald Trump said after October 7th, I don't think that there's a place where greater hatred exists on both sides, and for justifiable reason. Obviously, there's been a war going on there for some time. Now, when you go back and look at the history of this war, or let's say the anti-Israel detractors out there in the world, they'll say that Israel isn't legitimate. Well, Israel's legitimate on the same basis that America's legitimate. And I don't, it's not lost on me that people who make the claim that Israel isn't legitimate are also trying to make the claim that America as a nation isn't legitimate, which is why we don't have borders anymore, right? But when they say that Israel isn't legitimate, I immediately respond with, they won a war on three sides. Yeah, during the Yom Kippur War, they won a war on three. They were attacked on three sides and they won a war on three sides. So if you make the claim that they weren't legitimate, on that day, when they defeated their enemies, Israel became a legitimate nation. And praise be to God to that. And going forward, look, every nation has to decide how they go forward, how they exist, how they interact with the nations and their neighbors around them. Obviously, there is a significant cohort of people in the international community that openly scream things like death to America, death to Israel. Okay, where I'm from, you can't say death to America and me not view you as an enemy. There's no sort of esoteric way that you say death to America and I take you as a friend and not an enemy, unless I'm anti-American myself and I live in America. And there are a lot of anti-American citizens that live here in this country.
I see.
So my point in laying that out is, when people yell death to America, they've made themselves our enemies. Does that mean we condone any and everything Israel does? Absolutely not. Those two things, aren't inextricably linked. But again, my initial feeling is that Israel has plenty of claim to say, we're a legitimate nation. If you attack us, we're going to respond. And I feel the same way about America. The difference is where we have gotten involved in forever wars, like what's now happening there in the Ukraine. We are not responding to a direct attack on America. We're responding to an attack on another country. Israel was attacked in their country. So they have the right to respond the way they want to. Now, is there a perfect way to go about retaliation? There's never a perfect way to go about retaliation in war. That's just a product of war. Anybody who thinks otherwise is not being real about the conditions of war, the fog of war.
I see.
So,
I see.
so when again, I want to be clear here. And I also say this, I think there was a way, I think Donald Trump would have handled the conditions and the situation there better in the Middle East and around the world. I think, going way back, not way back, but further back in American history, there could have been a better solution so that it didn't come to the conflict that we're seeing now. But all of that is ex post facto. All of that is no longer really relevant right now. The situation is what it is there between Israel and Palestine, and only Israel can do what Israel sees fit, and only the Palestinians can do what they see fit. And if they feel like they're oppressed, and they want to start a war, well, they got their war. And it's the same with the Iranians. If the Iranians view the West as an oppressive force and they want to go to war, well, we're not backing down from a war, obviously. We would like to not have one. We would like to not have one. We would like to have peace, but we're not going to back down by any means. We won't take a single back step. So
I see. Now, Mr. White, I want to ask you about Minnesota statewide. You're running in a statewide election. And in recent years, we've seen Republicans make a lot of gains in the state. They haven't won statewide office, but in 2016, Donald Trump came within 2 percentage points of winning the state. He's been campaigning here with J.D. Vance. I believe you attended that rally that was held in late July. And there's some competitive congressional seats. Andrew Craig's seat in the suburbs of St. Paul and the Southwest. That's a competitive seat this cycle. And this is coming amidst the DFL having almost total control of the state for the last several years. Why do you think that shift is happening? Why is Minnesota entering more battleground state territory right now? What are the big issues that are driving people there?
Globalism has failed. That's my answer. Globalism has failed. The post-World War II Democrat liberal order has failed. The leadership and the lies of our permanent political class have failed. The managed decline is too much for the American people to bear, and they're sick of it. They want something different. Donald Trump represented a lightning rod. He's a galvanizing figure for that referendum and rejection of that circumstance. That American citizens are losing the value of their citizenship. People understand. They've gone out of their way. The mainstream media, in conjunction and partnership with our education system, has gone out of their way to brainwash and stupefy the American public. However, some things just become too obvious to ignore. For one, the price of your goods, your gas and your groceries, that's become too big to ignore. But the other are these cultural agendas like the LGBTQ. People had no clue what their kids were being taught in the schools until COVID hit, and all of a sudden you got remote learning, and you're listening over what your kid is being taught at school, and you hear that they're pushing transgenderism, and now people are saying, well, wait a second, maybe these people aren't just social democrats or socially liberal. Maybe it's a little bit further than being liberal. I would say that it's not really liberal anymore when you're forcing kids to be sexualized through the education system. So all of these things are coming together at a time where the spirit of globalism and global government and a more international based America political culture is already failing at a systematic level. And you look at the way that the debt is, not only here in this country, but around the world. We have a $4 quadrillion debt, bank debt, global bank debt. So the whole thing is coming unraveled, and the people here in Minnesota are in that, and they're waking up to it. So
I see. No, but the thing is that the whole state as a whole isn't moving towards the Republican Party. It's still pretty competitive for the DFL. They still have
we'll see. I don't.
And so I want to ask.
Wait a second. The whole state is moving towards Donald Trump. I'm not on face value. I'm not accepting that. I'm not accepting that the whole state is in control for the DFL. Look, we had a 200,000 vote gap. There was a 200,000 vote gap in the last gubernatorial race that Tim Walz won in 2022 against Dr. Scott Jensen. So, I mean, first of all, 200,000 votes by my measure, given the implications of all of the political referendums on the table, is not a huge swing, especially when you consider that there's 980,000 Black and Hispanic minorities in the state. So it's not as big of a gap as you would have in some other places. It already was a genuine purple state by many standards. The problem is that many of our rural Minnesotans have often aligned themselves with the DFL because they were the Democrat Farmer Laborers Union, and they've lied to the American working class and the Minnesota working class, pretending to be an advocate or a friend to the laborers through the unions. Okay, well, our farms are getting sold to China and our jobs are getting sold to China. So, and they're starting to understand that as well. I spent a lot of time out there in rural Minnesota, and we plan to spend a lot of time up there in the Iron Range, convincing a lot of the Iron Range workers that there's no sensible way they could vote for the Democrat Party. The Democrat Party wants to stop mining up in the Iron Range. They don't want to unleash it. And that goes for a lot of other, the farming as well in this country. So Minnesota's political future rests upon the edge of a blade. They have a razor thin lead, not only on paper, but certainly spiritually and ideologically over the Republicans. And that's why I'm here.
I see. And you're saying that the tip of that spear are rural Minnesotans who historically voted for the DFL but are now looking at Democratic policies and saying that's not for me. And you also mentioned
not only that, yes, the Black and Hispanic vote as well.
And you say that's moving towards Republicans right now.
Well, the black vote, the vote from Black men is going to move in Minnesota is going to move in the same trajectory we see on the national stage. And just in general, Black people in this country have, maybe more than any other group, been given the most false promises from the Democrat Party. And we saw them squeak by last time with Joe Biden being, backed by Obama, and they used this sort of celebrity, cachet and capital to convince Black voters that the Democrats haven't abandoned them or betrayed them, that the Democrats are going to deliver on those promises. The famous line is, if you ain't Black, if you don't vote for me, you ain't Black, from Joe Biden, right? People were offended by that then. They were fed up with it then. And I think they tried one last time to vote for the Democrats based on the racial narrative that's been driven. Now the racial narrative is completely busted at the seams. I mean, completely. And when you go on social media and you find, Black Americans posting all these pictures with Donald Trump when he was, younger at events with Don King and Oprah and Muhammad Ali and Mike Tyson and just all of these Black icons, to say, wait a minute, you told us he was racist, but go back and look at his history. Look at all these Black celebrities that loved him. And now you get people like Mike Tyson who are saying, I'm voting for Trump. What are you going to do about it? Right. I mean, so the energy culturally is shifting so quickly towards Donald Trump. We can't measure what's going to happen in this election in terms of the Black vote. I know what the mainstream media would have you believe. I know what the polls, quote unquote, would have you believe, but I'm with Black people every day in the community. And I'm telling you, there's an unprecedented wave of cultural support for Donald Trump in this election cycle. And obviously the Hispanic working class went first. My mentor and friend, Steve Bannon, this has been part of his life's work and mission over at War Room. And the Hispanic working class has already been on the move. So, I mean, we just don't know what's going to happen here in this cycle. But I tell you what, we're going to make sure that the Hispanic working class and Black working class in the state of Minnesota, down here in the Twin Cities, is going to get a fair representation of the value of the Republican Party. And I don't think that's happened in the state. In fact, my primary opponent, Joe Frazier, explicitly said that he was more concerned with the suburbs. He thinks that the state can be won with a suburban white woman. And I mean, that is just foolhardy. And I'm not saying that suburban white women won't vote Republican as well. And there are some swing and independent sort of voters in Twin City suburbia. But if he thinks that it's going to bear more fruit than the 1 million minorities, then he's not fit to be in this game. If he thinks he knows better than Bannon, he's not fit to be in this game.
I see. Well, Mr. White, thank you very much for your time. You've given us some great answers, and we'll definitely be sure to include them in the story that we run. And when we do so, we will definitely send your campaign a link to the story when it's been published. But I thank you very much for your time today to speak with me.
Okay, thank you.
You have a good day. Goodbye.